Okay, yes. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the 13th Annual SLO Symposium 2026. My name is Jarek. I'm a faculty coordinator from Santa Ana College in Southern California, and I founded the SLO Symposium back in 2014. This is our lucky 13, and the theme this year is assessment of what students can do, making learning observable. Before we begin, I want to express my sincere gratitude for our collaboration with Fresno City College, especially for the technical support that makes a fully online event like this run smoothly. Thank you to Enrique Jauregui, Susie Nitzel, Dr. Ghada Al-Masri, and the Fresno team for helping us host the Zoom event. We have a strong two-day program ahead, including our keynote this morning, breakout sessions, and the student panel discussion focused on how learning is defined, demonstrated, and assessed. With that, I would like to welcome Bethany Tasaka, President of California Outcomes Coordinators Hub, Coaches. So she's going to share a snapshot of who is in the room and what that says about our community. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Jarek. And I just want to say welcome to everyone. My name is Bethany Tasaka. I currently serve as the president of the California Outcomes Assessment Coordinators Hub, also known as Coaches. Coaches is a statewide professional network of faculty, coordinators, and other higher education professionals who are actively working on assessment of student learning. This is not about a compliance exercise, but it's a way of making our student learning more visible, more meaningful, and more fair. Many people first encounter coaches through events like this symposium, or through our Friday SLO talks. Others join because they're looking for a professional home where assessment of learning is practical, honest, and grounded in what's actually happening in our classrooms and our programs. If you're interested in collaborating, presenting, or participating in any working groups, or just simply staying connected to ongoing conversations beyond today, we invite you to get involved. Um, Coaches is an open network, and we welcome colleagues from California and beyond who want to contribute to this work. On our screen right now, you can see everyone who's involved in our coaches group. And as Jarek mentioned, this year's symposium has close to 800 registered attendees. That's so exciting, representing institutions and roles from across the country. This level of participation reflects a shared interest in moving assessment towards observable evidence of learning and away from vague or proxy measures. Before we begin this program, I would like to pass the baton over to Enrique Jauregui from Fresno City College for his welcoming remarks. Enrique, over to you.
Thank you, Bethany. My name is Enrique Jauregui. I am the SLO coordinator and outcomes coordinator for Fresno City College, located in the Central Valley of California. Um, as proud host of the symposium, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to everyone. I am grateful to the coaches group whose dedication has played a crucial role in bringing the symposium up and running every year. I'd like to thank all the presenters and attendees, especially who have contributed to making this symposium a success. The growth of the symposium in recent years has been remarkable, and I'm happy to share some numbers with you. Zoom registration numbers range from 300 to 700 in the past 5 years. In 2021, the attendance rate was 40%. Last year, in the last years, keeping the attendance at 70%, attracting participants from 30 plus different countries worldwide, making one of the largest SLO symposiums event in the nation. And it's all possible thanks to you. So thank you so much. At this point, I'd like to now, and it's my great honor to introduce Dr. Ghada Al-Masri, our Vice President of Fresno City College. Take it away, Doctor.
Thank you so much, Enrique, and welcome everyone. It is really a true honor to be here with all of you, but also to be part of this partnership. This is one of, I think, the most fruitful, engaging, supportive partnerships we've gotten to enjoy, and we are grateful to be partners with our California Outcomes Assessment Coordinator and with Santa Ana College, who founding the symposium. I think that this has done so much good for so many to be able to come together and share. How do we know what we're doing in terms of teaching? How do we know that we're being effective? And coming from, institutional effectiveness perspective, this is critical to ensure learning. So I'm just really honored to be part of this partnership in supporting this work. And I just want to say welcome. Fresno City College, as the first community college in California, is really thrilled that we get to continue in our partnership with all of you across the country. Thank you so much. Enjoy your whole day with all of the amazing events and activities.
Thank you, Dr. Al-Masri, for your support and your continued support in this event. Also on behalf of Fresno City College, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Today's agenda, Bethany, would you like to discuss?
Sure. So today we're starting off with our keynote today with Dr. Tamara Tate. You'll see our moderators from coaches, Zola Aponte and Jarek and myself. Then we'll transition into the first breakout session, our second breakout session, and we'll take a short little break for lunch or just a moment if you need it. And then we'll come back for an open forum panel discussion. Looking forward to that. That'll be exciting. We'll come back for breakout number 3, and then we'll end the day, because we love outcomes and we love measuring what learning looks like so very much. We ask you to please come back from 3 to 3:15 for an evaluation and survey. It really does help us gauge what's working and what's not working, and help us ensure, that every year this gets better and more tailored to you and your needs. So if you're able to join us, we would appreciate it.
And I also like to thank the symposium sponsors. There you are. You're so many of them. So gracious to the sponsors and especially the coaches group. Without your support, this event's not possible, right? At this point, I'd like to pass it on to Zola Ponte from Santa Ana College, who will be introducing our guest speaker. Take it away, Zola. So
sorry, yes. Yeah, sorry.
Thank you.
All right, there we go. So good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 13th Annual SLO Symposium. So my name is Zola Aponte, and I have been working in higher education for over 15 years in different capacities, and I currently work as a sociology instructor at several campuses in Southern California, and then I also serve as the Career Center Coordinator with the School of Continuing Education at Santa Ana College. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us for the keynote address as part of today's program. This year's symposium, as we've mentioned, it focuses on how learning is defined, demonstrated, and assessed, and then how institutions can use evidence of learning to improve what happens in classroom and programs. So it is my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Tamara Tate. Dr. Tate is the Associate Director of the Digital Learning Lab, and her research focuses on technology-supported learning, digital literacy interventions in secondary and post-secondary settings, and then the analysis of digital writing. So she leads the lab's work on generative AI and writing across both secondary and higher education contexts. And as the principal investigator of an NSF-funded grant, she is studying the use of generative AI in undergraduate upper division writing courses. She's also part of an intersegmental team working to strengthen academic writing and digital literacy across the University of California and California State University and California Community Colleges system through a California Education Learning Lab AI Grant Challenge grant. Dr. Tate earned her BA in English and her PhD in education from UC Irvine and her JD from UC Berkeley. Please join me, everyone, in welcoming Dr. Tamara Tate.
Thank you so much. It really is a privilege to be here with you. This is an amazing group. I've gone to many of your Friday webinars, and I'm just thrilled to be with such an engaged, active group. I put a link to my slides so that you could have them, and I will share them now as well online. The talk that you're going to hear stems from 3 years now, believe it or not. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I will update share permissions. 3 years of research already. It's hard to imagine, but we started this work right away after ChatGPT came out, and I was lucky enough to have partners in crime who were actively teaching at the time, and they were able to let us work side by side with them, and we have for years, as they navigate the ever-changing story of what's going on in the classrooms. So I try to stay as close to the classroom as I can. We are in a lot of classrooms observing. We now have over 50 instructors, UCI, Cal State Fullerton, and several community colleges that are working with us. And so I'm bringing that to you, but hopefully not in too much of a researchy way. But I just want to let you know, I'm not just making it up, I promise. And I'm not making it up when I tell you that you all have been training for this. I can say that legitimately and fairly to this group. It might be puff and smoke a little bit to others, but you really do have the pedagogical tools to meet this moment in a way that a lot of folks are not ready for. And because of that, you are going to be essential to help walking your colleagues and your students through this moment. And I just want to center one thing very clearly. We're going to keep the focus on humans because that's what we're here. We're not going to focus on tools. We're going to talk about learning outcomes, right? So this is language you're all going to be very comfortable and familiar with, I suspect. I hope to leave you with a clearer sense of how to decide if, when, or how generative AI might belong in an assignment or in your class or in your curriculum preparation. I'm going to give you a small set of human-driven habits that seem to us, from what we're seeing when we look at actual conversations and learning outcomes, to lead to more productive and responsible AI use. These habits are something that I think are going to be essential for us to start teaching our students and frankly ourselves. Even my own husband was laughing last night as he was telling me, he's a lawyer, and he was telling me how they had a training on a new AI tool they had. And he's like, and they didn't say we should think first. Well, as you'll learn, this is something that I always say. And so even those just in my sphere know that we always think first with AI. That habit has to be built because it's so easy to get sucked in to the ubiquitous AI. I'm also going to talk about some low-lift classroom moves that you can try this term, and I'm going to leave you with some resources, which is why hopefully you now have all the share permissions, but I've also shared with the team my slide deck so that there are links in it to get you to resources, and I'll tell you where those are as well. So you guys are usually pretty good in the chat. It seems a little quiet today, but oh, good. Thank you, Jill. Let's check in with each other a little bit. Let's wake up a little bit. Who are you? What do you teach? Which college or district? Is it online, hybrid, or in person? Tell me a little bit about that and each other about that so we know who's in the room. How much AI do you use? Probably a range. Then how are you feeling, and primarily about this AI in the classroom question. Are folks willing and able to jump into the chat for a minute and let us know their thoughts? ESL, okay, so ESL is a big deal. I actually have multilingual prompts for you. And in person is nice. Online and asynchronous is really tough. No one else is brave, just Susan? Oh, SLPs. I love SLPs. AI can probably be helpful with you for some of the models and the handouts and stuff that you need to make too. Online Cal State, you've already started to integrate. That's cool. Sierra uses it daily. Well, you're an instructional technologist. You have to be on the cutting edge. Good for you. Sandra's using some. Okay. Yeah, and I think that even if you're not an instructor, we're all kind of teaching people in our sphere one way or another. So I think this will still be true. I am glad Michael is feeling awesome today. That is a lovely thing to hear. Asynchronous, so tricky, Jarek. And I'm glad you're using it all the time. I hope maybe you'll share some of your thoughts in the chat as we go along. Currently in person, Julie, good. Jacob's funny. He tries to keep his AI use under a hotel pool worth of water usage each year. That's good. Check your Netflix usage too, if you're an environmentally concerned person, which is, I won't be talking, just to be clear, about the significant ethical issues around environmental concerns, intellectual property concerns, privacy concerns, not to denigrate them, but we only have so much time. And we have some resources on that I'll share with you. But I do want to just put a pin in and acknowledge there are very legitimate reasons to choose not to use AI. When students choose not to use AI, I very much respect that, as long as it is not just a knee-jerk response, right? I want it to be a thoughtful, considered position, then great. Perfect. Okay, we've got a lot of variety. Thank you all for playing in the chat. It helps me just sort of feel like we have more than a bunch of screens in the room. So part of why I asked this is because, like you do in your class, right? We start by assessing where our students are when they arrive. One thing that we see right now, given the fluidity and the speed with which this AI has come up with us, our students are coming even more heterogeneous than ever before, right? So some students know it well, some students don't know it at all, and they're all in between. And so we really do need to understand where they're coming from and maybe get them a little bit closer together for the next stage when they leave our class. We're also really seeing that instructor beliefs and classroom context shapes whether and how AI shows up in learning. So depending on what you feel your role is, what you believe your students are capable of, all these things will impact how any intervention shows up when you actually bring it into your classroom. And we're very firm believers that instructors should be the gateway and know their classrooms and know how to make those decisions. So I'll give you a variety of options and things that you can use that you can pick and choose what fits in with your classroom, with your personality even, right? Because some things work for us more authentically than others. Why I asked about emotions, we need to hold some space for our own exhaustion, grief, anger, fear, and our students. There's a lot going on in the world. There are a lot of fairly strong emotions around AI, and that's out there and true, and we need to deal with it because it's going to be there regardless. So I'm not going to give you any one size fits all solution that fits every course, every student, every term. I'm going to talk a little bit more about things like habits and ways to think about stuff, hopefully. So just to give you sort of a roadmap, we're going to talk a little bit about why care. Why do I care about AI? Why would we spend a keynote talking about AI? This isn't necessarily for you. Maybe you have your own opinions already, but there's a lot of conversation in the hallways, and I want you to be prepared, or with your students, with some ideas around why one might care. Then we're going to go back to basics and talk about your pedagogical toolbox. This is where I say, you already know so much of what it's going to take to meet this moment. And I'll share some emerging best practices that hopefully will help you integrate it in a way that supports learning, doesn't offload learning. And I'll end up with some practical moves for both you and your students. So why should I care? Reality is generative AI is already in the room. There are lots of ways you may notice this in your class. The unusually fluent drafts, people think that the M dash is all about AI. And we're going to really hold, as we think about this, what is our learning goal? How does AI change that goal? And what support do students need to use that AI responsibly or not to use it? There's some equitable issues that I want to raise, and unfortunately I can't solve them for you, but I want you to have them in mind as you think about when and how and if to integrate AI. We see very much that the rich get richer. The more AI literacy a student have, the better writer a student already is, they can use the AI better and get better results out of it. This can lead to an expansion of inequity, right? And that's tricky. With or without is a tension that I feel is really bubbling up the hardest right now for me to solve. If students never learn to use AI, they're going to be at a disadvantage in the future that involves AI. But if they use it too much, too early, they're going to be robbed of foundational skills. And navigating that tension is part of what instructors have always had to do. What is scaffolding? What is offloading? What is the zone of proximal development for your students? So the good news is you continue to do the hard work. But we do want to explicitly mention it so that we're considering which is what is where. And for those dealing with English learners, there is a particular concern or issue because we've always told English non-native speakers, multilingual students, to copy or model themselves after the native speakers of a language. And now they're having to navigate very difficult issues of plagiarism, which becomes especially tricky when you have things like AI detection, largely over false positives for AI use in English learners' language. There's also what we call the June-July contradiction, where in June, the seniors are not allowed to use AI, and in July, they're expected to in their jobs. So these are the tensions we're all navigating. But if you're willing to posit that AI is unavoidable and already in the class, I would argue that all students need AI literacy, and that's not set up in the system right now. So that unfortunately means a lot of us are going to have to spot it in before students leave us, because it's not built into the K-12 system. It's not already planned out. So literacy is best learned through authentic uses. And one of the most authentic uses we're seeing right now with generative AI is using it for writing. Also in your classrooms, perhaps one of the more problematic areas. But guided practice increases the likelihood that students learn to use that AI productively and responsibly. I really want them to learn how to use it or make choices not to use it under our watch, right? I want them to make smaller mistakes. I want them to fall off the tricycle before they ride the motorcycle out in the big bad world. So that's why I personally feel like AI literacy is something that needs to be baked in when I'm teaching a writing class. And when I talk about AI literacy, just to sort of center us and use the same language, I'm talking about skills or competencies that enable students to know how to critically evaluate the technologies, communicate and collaborate effectively with them, use them as a tool, understand them, and be wise about them. So just to get this off the table, because it's often the first question I get, what about AI detection? I'm going to just say no. There are serious issues of bias, particularly around students who are multilingual. the use of it can really destroy the trust relationship in the teaching. And honestly, they're gonna outmaneuver you, right? Like, we already hear about students dumbing down their writing so they don't get flagged for detection. Like, what craziness is that? And yet it really is happening. Like, oh, good. I was told the other day by one of my learning technologists in my description of my class, I had to take out the M dash. She's like, people, whether it's true or not, are going to think if there's an M dash in there that you used AI to do it, and that makes students really angry. I'm like, okay, look, I'm not going to die on this hill, but I'm an English major. I've used M dashes for most of my 60 years. So can we maybe like keep the M dash on if I promise to talk about it? So up to you. I don't feel like that's a productive place for me to be. But especially if you're teaching asynchronous online classes, that may not feel possible. And so if you must, I love and trust Anna Mills, and I put a link in the slides, and she talks about how she uses what she calls a Swiss cheese approach for her online asynchronous writing classes. And one of those components is an AI detection, but it's a thoughtful, nuanced approach, and the only one I'm willing to share with you, because I know that Anna is a brilliant teacher and cares about her students. And yes, Sierra, transparency. Yes, you will see that in my slides. I agree completely. And when you start talking about it, it becomes less of a problem, I'm hearing. But I give you the Anna Mills approach because some people just can't. So here's some nuance and some things to consider. So it is not unusual for somebody to ask me, do we still need to write? And after I sigh heavily, I say yes. But we've kind of misused writing in assessment, especially, right? Because it's a lot easier to have, well, it feels like a higher order of Bloom's taxonomy to have students write what they know to show us their content learning than just observe it in an ABC multiple choice. Understand. But that's not really the kind of writing I care mostly about. So we're going to go back to our chat for a minute because it's going to ground us, because most of what I'm going to be talking about is about writing. I want to know why you write and why your students write in your class. And then we'll maybe talk a little bit about what we notice. So I'm going to write a couple of notes in the chat about why I write and ask you to do the same. Yes, Kate. Have you already read the slides? Good job. Communicate, yes. Capture your thoughts, yeah. I talk about, I write, oh, typo, apologies, to explain and systematize information. Yes. Communicating self to others. I noticed they hate it just as I did at one time. You know, that I'm going to blame some of that on K-12, that hatred of writing, because we've sucked all the joy out of it and made it all about 5-paragraph essays and argumentative writing. And I write to communicate and sometimes to vent. Yes. To get my ideas down. I do that so much, April. Process ideas, clarify. Yeah, I figure out what I think when I start writing. Beautiful. Why are the students writing? To learn to process evidence-based practice strategies. Yeah, practice, that's good. Why else do we see our students writing in class? See, you probably guys only use it for good reasons. I feel like a lot of the writing our students do in class is maybe not as authentic. Journaling and reflection are excellent ways to get writing skills. But how much are your students doing that in class? Probably not much. Probably not much. Okay. So I think we agree, students may write to fulfill requirements. Yeah. I want them to connect personal experiences to new ideas or personal reactions. See, they're connecting them. It's not just to show what they know. Yeah, I like that. To evaluate my mind and what patterns arrive. Not enough, Sierra, yes, not enough. I've got a lot of research on that. In response to in-class activities or to take notes. I will tell you that I believe it's 75% of the writing students do in secondary school is taking notes or filling in worksheets, short answer stuff. So that kind of explains why they aren't the best writers in your class. So we're writing to communicate across space and time. My grocery list example is me telling tonight's Tamara to not forget the ketchup. We write for an audience usually. We talk a lot about that. You guys are doing a lot of nice connections, right? So the audience within the class to share with each other. And sometimes human connection is the value. Sometimes it's not. Like my grocery list doesn't really have much to do about human connection. There is an ad that I feel kind of.
My little girl's always been running, just like me. I've always thought she was following in my footsteps. Hey, go get her, baby. But lately, she's been looking up to someone else. She might even be the world's #1 Sydney fan. And like Sydney, she's focused on her technique. Good job, baby. Accelerate off the curve. High knees, high knees. There you go. She wants to show Sydney some love, and I'm pretty good with words, but this has to be just right. So Gemini, help my daughter write a letter telling Sydney how inspiring she is. And be sure to mention that my daughter plans on breaking her world record one day. She says, sorry, not sorry.
Okay. Is anyone else horrified? Or is it just me? But it actually shows some things that we're seeing and hearing from students. This has to be just perfect. That's a lot of the pressure we're hearing for, I like where the sisters are in the hashtag saying, yeah, right? It is marvelously unaware, this sad. And it has actually been pulled by Gemini. Our students want to be perfect, and they think that the language, the words coming out from the AI is better than what they could produce. And it does seem to be more fluent and more grammatically correct, but it's not better. And yeah, I also love Penny. I agree. Why is Dad writing the fan letter? I feel like we maybe need to let students do a little bit more of their own work. But I think there's so many layers to what is wrong with this. But to me, it reminds me that it is essential to be thinking about why we're writing and the situations, which is not everyone, where human connection is the value. Is that yes, it might well be, Aaron, our fault, because we haven't valued transparently their voices and privileged that over the correction and the critique. And I think that's a role that we can all play by valuing that more explicitly. A lot of you talked about we write to think, to synthesize information, learning. There's a lot of things about connecting it, right? And the precision, the words, finding the right word helps us refine our ideas. It extends our working memory. I think we need to be more transparent about why we're writing, because our students are going to have to start making choices about whether they're going to write something or the AI is going to write it. And if we don't start modeling and explicitly talking about why we're writing and both the purpose of it and the values of it, yeah, AI is good at taking away students' voices. It does even, and I agree about it, it changes the content as well. And I want them to know and feel that. but we have to start actively talking about it in order for them to understand it. I also want us to be fair and acknowledge not all writing tasks carry the same value. Some are busy work and some don't require humans. I had to write a really annoying 6-month grant report this last week, and I used AI a lot because no one was going to read the report. And it was not the best use of my time, but everybody was checking boxes. And that seemed like a really decent place to offload because I didn't really need to think about it. It wasn't really requiring a lot of humanness. So I want students to think about that. This is a great segue, Enrique. Thank you. Will AI take the culture of human voices? All tools shape our thinking and our writing. Every new tool transforms how humans write and think. So think about, and maybe in the chat, talk about how is writing with a pencil versus a pen, 2 different tools, change your writing process. Right? With a pencil, you could erase and make small changes at least. With a pen, you might, if you care about your output, stop and think about how to spell a word or have to be much more linear in your writing than students now writing in Google Docs all the time, where you can jump around, right? Where you can collaborate in real time with people. So that's something that we need to understand. We talk about writing sometimes as if it's one big monolithic thing, but we have to start being more explicit and thinking and talking about how, depending on your tool, your writing process may change slightly, right? Each tool has different affordances. Google Docs makes moving sections really easy. I am actually old enough that I know cut and paste literally meant cut the paper and tape it in different places. Thank you, Jarek. Yes, right? Okay, like I was a lawyer. This is how we actually cut and paste. It's beautiful to be able to just move stuff, but it also is easy to get lost in a Google Doc. And we need to talk about that and maybe talk about how our process might deal with that reality by remembering to go back and outline our writing to make sure that it makes sense still. And there are ways to use those digital tools more effectively. Like one little thing that I do sometimes, if I'm having trouble with a paragraph and I decide that it's appropriate and I use ChatGPT to help me with something, when I paste it into my document, I often turn it blue. I put the font into blue because when I work on my revisions, I want to remember this was not generated in my mind and it's probably wrong somewhere and I need to be extra critical about it. Now that's just, it's like a silly little tip, but it's based on my AI literacy that I know AI is harder to revise than human writing because of its fluidity, and I know that it hallucinates, right? So that's my AI literacy shaping my writing process. And as we're figuring this out, we need to be saying these things out loud to our students so they can think about their writing process. And as I think folks said in the chat, we really need to talk about when humanness matters and should be protected, right? The art of wabi-sabi, the art of imperfection, actually makes beauty out of the cracks in a pot by putting gold into it. Sometimes I explain it to my students by saying the Taylor Swift digital recording is very accurate and precise and great music maybe, or you pick your artist, but seeing her live in tour is a different experience because it will never be repeated exactly again. And there's something about how when the mic battery goes out and she deals with it, or her voice cracks, or she reacts to the crowd, that's where that humanness matters. And that is a different special thing that needs to be protected. And I don't think we've been doing that in writing, right? And maybe other areas, but I think we're going to have to start being a little more explicit about it. We also need to learn to decide, as I kind of alluded to in the beginning, when using AI offloads key skill building versus scaffolds learning. Really tough, really tough. But by at least being aware of the question, we can make a better job deciding. And when we tell our students are worried about this. I get end of the term reflections from one of my classes, one of my instructors that I've been working with for 3 years. And for 6 quarters, there is a decent chunk of students who say, I don't want to use AI because I want to make sure I learn how to write. Bless them, right? And I appreciate that. And I'm glad that they notice. The hard part is I want them to be able to write both with and without AI. And so we've got to navigate when that's appropriate. We also have to think about productive friction that promotes learning. A lot of what we see out of the AI is very frictionless, right? Some of that, we were talking about some of the language and how fluid it is. But some amount of friction is necessary for learning. Some of it is unnecessary. The instructors who tell me, and I have one, the students need to suffer and struggle. I think, do they? Have you read the news? I think they got enough struggle in their life. So, at that point, when you have that mindset, students will often just check out. So we got to figure out that sweet spot. That's tough. We also want to think about what role AI might play without sacrificing learning or humanness. So we're going to go back to basics. And our learning goals, yes, those good old learning goals, are going to drive our AI decisions. So this is a sort of a process that we walk through our instructors, where we talk about how you might infuse AI into your curriculum and how you might want to take those decisions in order and iteratively, right? But we start, as most of you will be very familiar with in your own work, with identifying our learning objectives. We have to start there, both in the content area and I'd argue maybe AI literacy too, and then use good old backward design best practices, interrogate our content to understand how it's supporting learning, and then think about the AI role, make our revisions, reflect on it, and reintroduce whatever we need to reintroduce. Right? That sounds like, well, sure, have a big deal. But instructors aren't just uniformly working from the place of starting with their learning goals. They're feeling a lot of pressure to be reactive to what they're seeing show up in their class. And a lot of folks, if I ask this question to a normal group of instructors, have you looked at your SLOs lately? The honest answer would be not in several years. You guys are different, and I appreciate that. But this is a chart that California State University Chico's Division of Teaching and Learning puts out, where the instructors list their learning objectives and the related assignments or activities, and then think about each one about the AI disruption, right? Is this learning objective still the right one? Then they have to think about, like, do I have the power to change it? Where would I go? Do I care? But understanding whether your learning objectives are quite right is an important starting point, because writing today is different than writing was 5 years ago. Then once you're thinking about your SLOs, the backward design process, right? Where are we trying to go? How are we going to assess it appropriately? And then plan our learning experiences. So the next thing you do is look specifically at each assignment. And that you have a lot more power over, right? You might not be able to change your learning objectives, but you can look at each assignment and think about, how effective is AI at doing this task on its own without learning or thinking? What programs might do this? What would that look like if the AI did it? Oh, do I need to change that assignment? What are some alternatives? Who can I talk to about that? This work also shows that sometimes folks haven't mapped their assignments to their learning objectives in quite a long time. Again, probably not a problem with this group, but one of the things that the Cal State University Chico folks were mentioning was sometimes we think all this work that we're having to do that we're feeling so frustrated about is about the AI. And sometimes it's about not having looked at our SLOs or assignment alignment in a while. And yeah, technology amplifies good and bad, right? So if your alignment was already off, if your assessment was already not great, AI is going to really show that sometimes. So that's why I say we have to know why we're writing so we can make sure that the learning objective is the focus, decide when, if, and how AI might be a problem and how it might be a tool. Writing to show what we know as opposed really about thinking or really about communicating are the most susceptible kinds of tasks to offloading with AI and create the most academic integrity challenges. So this is where I think we're seeing the most problems. If it is truly a summative assessment that is important for the quality, integrity of your course outcomes, then you might have to do in-person writing or even oral assessment if that's where you are. That's exhausting and hard for a lot of folks, and maybe not necessary. Maybe you can shift your focus from the product more to the process with multiple checkpoints and drafts with lower stakes points along the way. What you're doing then is explicitly showing them the process, which I'm going to argue is really important. If we don't know the process, it's a lot harder for us to insert AI intelligently and strategically. So I want students to become more and more aware and familiar with processes. How do we write lab reports? How do we approach these kinds of problems? How do historians corroborate things? Because with that kind of disciplinary knowledge, if they decide to use AI, we have at least taught them how to supervise the AI, right? Also, if you have lower stakes points, it's less worth going to the trouble of going to AI. So there are a lot of good reasons that I think we're going to really need, wherever we can, to shift from a product focus to a process focus. We're also going to want to pull out our good universal design for learning and think about alternative modalities. That helps with engagement, authenticity, agency. You need all those tools you can get to keep students doing the work. I also think sometimes we can, I don't know, be a little evil and turn the tables on them. I don't know, it's not evil. We're plenty of evil. It's not evil. We can be strategic. We can have students critique or correct AI output to show understanding. You know, that makes them critically think. It also develops an AI literacy about how AI can go wrong. I think revising AI writing is really hard because of its fluency and its cohesion. And so we're going to really need to develop that habit. So for instance, one example of a history teacher at UC Irvine, what he does in his US history class, they talk a lot about mythology and how we rewrite the narratives of our history. And so for the midterm, he goes to AI and has it summarize a couple of periods of time. And then the assignment for the students is to go and fact check it and correct it and figure out what's wrong or what nuances are missing. So that's harder to use AI for. It's developing their revision skills and their critical thinking and their historical disciplinary practices of corroboration and sourcing. And it's helping them realize, oh, AI has bias because of what it was trained on. And so we can expect it to sound a lot like a middle-aged white guy from Western Europe and America. Those are all cool things and kind of an interesting, fun project, right? Like as far as midterms goes, that's not a bad one. I also point out sometimes to instructors, the AI prompt itself can reveal students' learning. A good prompt will often show some audience awareness, an understanding of genre and the restrictions and the constraints and the rationale and the content knowledge. And you can see that all in the prompt that they use. So there are ways to actually use the AI or interactions with the AI to reveal learning. So if in the process of this, you realize you might need to revise some things, pull out your universal design for learning guidelines, think about multiple means of engagement, representation, expression. Think about how you can make this product more authentic. It's going to be engaging. It's going to prepare them more for the real world. How do you make the process more authentic? What kinds of things are they going to need to produce in your field out in the world? Give them agency. These things are going to make it easier for them to stay engaged. The other thing I'm really seeing, besides a need to really explain to students what the processes are some habits. I'm going to talk about the AI habits, but I think one overarching habit is self-regulated learning. What's really tough is when you go into Adobe these days, it will ask you if you want it to summarize your text. I don't have to ask it. It will offer. Microsoft Word, would you like me to do? No, stop, right? So one of the key habits is going to be self-regulated learning, where students realize the importance of planning, setting goals, laying out their strategies, using those strategies and then monitoring their performance over time, and then end up with reflecting on their performance. You will see when I show you our AI habits, these are kind of baked in, but I think that they go with the non-AI stuff too, and we need to be a little clearer about explicitly instructing them, being transparent about it, modeling them, and helping students really build this muscle. Some quick reminders about instructional scaffolding that we know from education research. Manageable chunks are important. So that whole process over product thing where I talked about small pieces, very consistent with that. It also concentrates attention on the task at hand, right? We want as few distractor issues as possible. You don't want them to spend their time making the PowerPoint pretty. You want them to spend their time thinking about the content that they're trying to express. Models are really helpful in this, and extended opportunities to practice in new situations. Right? That's where we're going to really get the transfer of the learning if they go from learning to do critical thinking here to critical thinking there. If they remember to reflect here and also there. So AI can be a scaffold for some of this, but only if we make sure we're keeping the students doing the thinking, and then we offer assistance as needed. So if you're going to revise an assignment, make it authentic, both as to product and process, build in agency and choice, and increase your AI resistance thoughtfully. So I've mentioned that we think that there are habits when you turn to the AI that are important. Let's talk about those. I mentioned about my husband and the think first thing. This was one of our one of the first things that my co-PI and I had to navigate and think about, because one of the things folks said in the early days of 2023, go to the AI to brainstorm. And then I talked to more and more composition instructors and other folks, and they're like, whoa. I don't want them going to the AI reflexively first. And I thought about that, and I'm like, actually, that makes a lot of sense. And then I thought about what we know from psychology and how once we start down a path, it's really hard to get people to diverge. I mean, confirmation bias is real, and noticing is real, and the tendency to believe that what the computer puts out is accurate is real. These are real psychological things. I mean, we've all been in the process of, my kid was buying a car last year and he was thinking about a Kia, and all of a sudden I saw Kias everywhere, right? That's just how the human mind works. And that happens with the AIs too. So we need to inoculate ourselves and our kids against going reflexively to that AI and remind them about their humanness and why that matters, that they're more creative and interesting and diverse, and have a better understanding of the desired outcome than any AI can be. So they need to think first about what they want to write, what output they want before they turn to the AI. Now, sometimes it's not worth it. I'm not talking about stupid things, right? But if it's something that we care about, that we're writing for good reason, or thinking about for good reason, do your own thinking first. Then we talk about good enough prompting, because back in 2023 and even 2024, there was a lot of talk about prompt engineering was the new future. You're going to make hundreds of thousands of dollars. Well, funny enough, the AI's gotten better, and it doesn't matter that much. We do think it's good to teach folks how to do certain kinds of techniques, and I'll walk you through some of those. But if all else fails, use a conversational term and just get started, right? Like, don't let perfection freeze you up. Much more important, and we're learning that we really have to even give to students like word sentence frames for this, is this idea of be the boss. To remember that the human's the boss of the AI. So they need to ask it questions, make it clarify, expand, or revise things. This iterative prompting keeps the human in charge so that they're defining what the appropriate outcome is. And this can be very uncomfortable for some students, and they don't always have the language for this. So we provide it, and we talk about it, and we point it out in classrooms as it's happening. Corroboration and interrogation is nothing new, but is especially important if you're going to go to the AI. And I'll talk about a couple of things you can do to help build that skill. But students need to understand that it can be wrong, that it's very sycophantic, and it's going to always tell them they're wonderful and everything's perfect. And that there's going to be bias in there. So that's what that interrogate part, right? Some criticality needs to say, well, okay, what is missing here? And then ultimately take a moment and figure out what worked and what didn't so that you can improve. As I mentioned on the self-regulated learning, that lines up really nicely with the whole setting goals, beginning with the end in mind, the self-monitoring around, is the output meeting my needs? Is it accurate? Right? And then reflection at the end, making sure I met my goals. Do I want to adjust my goals differently next time? Was that worth it? Maybe it's just not even worth turning to the AI if I've got to do all of this process. For God's sakes, Tamara, don't make me do all of that. Well, I'll just write it myself. Okay. All right. But don't reflexively hit that easy button, right? Don't just start with the AI for everything. Take a pause, have a moment, set your intentions. It's like when we talk about tapping into background knowledge and reading. It's a very strength-based approach, and it keeps the student in charge of the AI. Okay, what does that look like? I'm going to give you something tangible. So we often find an easy lift for instructors to integrate AI into their process. A lot of classes have a peer review process where the student writes a text, exchange text with their peers, give them some feedback, and then revise the text. We can add AI as a second step in that process. So once again, we say, start first by reading the writing and make your own notes on what you notice before turning to the AI. Then get the AI feedback, evaluate it for accuracy and clarity, and then reflect on what the differences are. What kind of feedback do humans give versus AI? And it's going to depend on the human, both the human giving the review and the human reading the review, on what they prefer, right? But it's a great opportunity to get additional feedback, because students don't get enough feedback, and for them to understand the affordances and limitations of getting feedback from AI. We want, when they go to ask that AI for feedback, though, for them to use prompting techniques where they're going to take some advantage of the affordances of the AI. So by asking better questions based on content knowledge that they already have, or knowledge of the genre that they already have, or knowledge of their audience that they already have, they're going to get better initial output without doing as much iterative prompting. Roles and persona is a weird, special thing that can really help prompting. When you tell the AI who you want it to be, that puts it into the right place in the vectors of words and numbers that it's using for prediction to get a better response. We had a weird situation the first time we used our AI tool that we've created in a middle school class. The instructors decided that they were going to let the students talk to the AI tool in our little walled garden to prepare and get background knowledge before they read Go Number the Stars. We didn't know that's what they're planning to do, and I had a grad student inside the classroom, and he was actually slacking me, and I could actually see on my back end student conversations. Number the Stars is about the Holocaust, and this was in 2024, and we weren't sure how good our moderation was, and we knew that there's a lot of bias embedded, so we were a little nervous about this. But we had told, as part of our prompt, that the AI was to act like a middle school teacher. And that happily set it off in a pretty darn good direction. The voice it used was like your stereotypical middle school teacher. Of course, she was a woman. And so there were still biases and whatnot built in. But by articulating what role or persona you want it to take, you really can change the kind of output you get. I mean, we even had one student during the process who was just like overwhelmed by the amount of text the chatbot was putting out. And she said, I'm not really a sixth grader. She types this. I'm not really a sixth grader. I just don't understand this. Just too much. And the AI, based on the persona of the teacher, said, that's okay, Chloe. We'll take it step by step. Let's start here. And we're like, oh, we didn't teach him that. And we think it's because of the persona, right? The other thing personas can do is help you get around the sycophantic property. So if I tell the AI, like I will put through one of my papers I'm writing, and I will tell it to be what we call reviewer number 2. Reviewer number 2 is sort of a meme for the really cranky, nasty, picky person that we get comments from. And that's one of the ways to get the AI to actually give you criticism. We had students in one of our engineering classes who were frustrated because the AI kept just saying, oh, your project is really nice, it's really fine. And they're like, no, be mean, be rough, and they kept pushing and pushing at it. So I was, of course, thrilled because they were being the boss. My instructor was thrilled too. They were giggling in the back, and she walked over to see what they were doing, and they're like, oh, we're working. She's like, it's cool. You're being the boss. I like that. And then they're like, okay, now do it in Gen Z language. And that playfulness and curiosity was facilitated because the instructor had been transparent, and they were working together, and she was able to say, hey, that's a great way to get it to give you actual criticism. And they could talk about how that worked or made it more interesting or whatever. So having students play with the AI with us is a way that we can really push their AI literacy a little further. Telling the AI what your goal is, your details, your context will also really help you get better prompting. So are there ways to teach that? Yeah, easy. Have the whole class maybe create a week prompt, something like that we would just dash off transactionally, like write me an essay about why AI is bad. And then talk about what kind of quality of output you expect to have. Put it in and evaluate the output. Then students in pairs or small groups or even on their own can revise the prompts using some of that information we talked about on how to make prompting a little bit better. And then they can see what the difference of the output was. We can all discuss what made that prompt more effective. And coming back together, we can talk about what worked, what didn't, what we might do. This is reflection. And the teacher can point out where the value was in using language precisely, where their content knowledge of what they'd learned already about what a good engineering memo should look like, that knowledge that they brought to the task made it better output. Whoops, sorry. There we go. And then we remind them that the AI is predicting based on the language that it's given, reminding them that AI doesn't think, right? It's just a prediction machine, and a prediction machine working off certain training materials that were then trained by people, right? We're going to bake in these things as we talk through it. You can also use a debatable topic and see how the differences in the questions you ask gives you a different answer. This is that sycophancy, right? So if you ask, why is AI bad? You get a very different output than why is AI good? So students can practice and see that. They can then look and see what their peers did and see how different things matter and don't matter. And this is all language use and critical thinking in ways that could be appropriate for your learning objectives. This is the Be the Boss details. Ask the AI to clarify, correct, maybe constrain it. One of the first times I asked AI to create a learning activity for me, because I wanted to see what it would do, it created like an entire day activity. I'm like, oh, no. I forgot the constraint. Do it in 15 minutes, right? And then you get very different output. So that's where the human stays in charge. But some of our students don't have the language for that. It's culturally uncomfortable to be pushing back because the AI has a very human-like interface. And we need to remind them that it's not. Right? So it's okay to push back to the AI. It's okay to talk back to the AI because it is not a human. You talk to the peer next to you differently than you have to talk to AI. The AI doesn't feel things. These are going to be important things to make sure students are really, really deeply understanding. So in practice, we might have them use AI to summarize a text and then evaluate the initial input and then push back by having AI change something and evaluating how that looks, right? So that's where that pushback stage gets put in. It also can kind of translate into corroboration, which is our next stage. Sometimes you're working with AI or students are working with AI before they actually have the content knowledge. I'm helping out on a project where we're doing some work on the 250th anniversary of the Constitution. And I'm not a historian by training. I've done a decent amount of work in history classes. But when we're working on some things, one of the things that was helpful for me to do was to push back if what the AI said was a good assignment or a good handout by saying, how would this type of historian criticize this document? What would be the counter argument? What is the weakest part of this argument? And I knew enough from history to say who is missing from this story, right? Those kinds of questions, even when you don't exactly know what the weakness is because you're not versed in that area, if you get into the practice of asking these kinds of questions of the AI, you're going to get more useful, productive, critical information back. So I've got some resources for that, a good article by Laura Yost, who calls this guerrilla prompting, and how it works. The corroboration and interrogation is something that needs to be practiced so you can summarize the knowledge and then check it for accuracy. Students can generate a study guide, but then fact check it. So first of all, they're learning it kind of twice, right? So you're getting a couple extra revisions in. And they're getting some AI literacy because it might be wrong. The problem with this is they don't always do the fact checking part. There was a post or an article I read recently where an instructor thought for sure their students had cheated because they all mentioned the same thing that hadn't been taught in their test. So in the test, they say, you know, for example, they cited XYZ hypothesis or study or whatever, and they hadn't been taught that thing. And like 40% of the students mentioned it. So she's like, that must be an AI or something. And she ran the question through AI, and yes, AI pulled in that thing. And she's like, oh, clearly they cheated. Then she found out that her TA had created a study guide for the students, and this thing was in that study guide. So they didn't get it from the AI, the TA got it from the AI and didn't fact check it. It wasn't actually wrong, but it was additional information. So we gotta be really careful again about that policing thing, right? And we need to be fact checking and corroborating and teaching how our discipline figures out what's true and correct and accurate. And that will also prepare our students with some habits of mind that will serve them well in the world. You can have students use AI to generate content with source citations and look up the sources to fact check the evidence. Sometimes you'll notice that the AI stuff is very general or vague. And so if you want to really double down on this, I've seen some instructors have students color code AI output for accurate and important versus vague or general versus missing or misleading. If that's appropriate for your learning objectives, that's one thing. One thing I've been thinking about doing is for some assignments, I may have students include a printout, like a page of the source, and circle where it says what they're citing it for. Because students have gotten really sloppy about citing things anyway. They're like citing it without actually understanding what the study did in my cases. And maybe just some general words or in the abstract, right? So this is a way of developing that habit of realizing, oh, when I cite something, I don't cite it because the paper I read cited it. I actually have to go to the paper that did it originally. So just some tips for enhancing that. Reflection questions, the basics. What did you do? How did it work? Where did AI help? Where did it mislead? What will you do differently? There are plenty of times I see students say, I'm not going to bother next time. So a couple of concrete low-lift ways to implement it. There are things you could use AI throughout the process of writing. And again, remember, I'm all about talking about the process these days, right? So that they know there should be a planning process. There should be a drafting. They all know about the drafting part. It's the planning and reviewing they don't do. And so maybe we throw the AI especially into those places. So how do we see students using AI across writing instruction? We see most of them using it for feedback. And that's because it was driven by what the instructors allowed or suggested. But we're seeing already students are developing their own almost personalities of how they use AI. And so I, of course, was really excited to see what we're calling the intentional users who are showing AI literacy and choosing when to use it and pushing back and doing all those things that we think are important. We're also seeing a lot of minimalists where they're like, yeah, I don't really need it. I'm going to just do it. It's not worth my time. It's not worth the energy, whatever. And then we're seeing that there are some offloaders, right? Who are saying, I had to write it. I went to the AI, I wrote it, we're done. And you're seeing that across all different stages of the writing process. The good news about them using it for feedback and scoring is that even 2 years ago with 3.5, scoring and feedback were pretty good already. And it's getting better and better. So the feedback is not quite as good as humans, but it's within about a point of accuracy. Keeps a pretty supportive tone, so it shouldn't hurt motivation too much. Is fairly clear and is better than humans at sticking to the rubric. We know human feedback is not perfect and human scoring isn't perfect either. So I don't feel uncomfortable having students use it for feedback. I do, however, want to remind them, no matter who is giving them the feedback, whether it's the AI or their peer, stay with me here, or the instructor, they are the author and they get to be the boss of their writing, and they're responsible for their writing and what they turn in, right? So I want to build that habit again of agency and critically thinking, do I agree with this? Because if they just grab it and go and take the feedback, that's not teaching them how to be writers. But I want them to stay human-centered. I want them to know that what they decide, what they think matters. Even if we're going to disagree about whether they should have an Oxford comma or not. I'm pro-Oxford comma. But I will allow my grad students to make a different choice as long as they do it consistently. So if we're going to use AI in any way, shape, or form, we have to know some of the fundamentals. And your students may not know these. Your friends, your parents may not know these. You can make the world a little bit better by sharing some of these things. Top. AI can't think, right? It's just a prediction tool. It's based on what you put in. It's based on what it was trained on. It's based on what the then humans imposed upon it. One thing I remind students is it was trained on the internet, which means Reddit. Do you really want Reddit to do some of your most important thinking? I mean, if you're choosing where to go for dinner, sure. And AI can help you with travel planning, all kinds of things. But if it's important, you're going to need to really take that with a grain of salt. It also makes things up. It was built to chat. That's that sycophantic thing. It's never supposed to say, I don't know. It doesn't use the hedging language that people use when they say, well, I think that, or I'm pretty sure, right? Humans often give you a gauge of how strongly they think they know what they know. AI knows everything completely. It's very much an authority on everything. And that's very persuasive if you haven't put in that critical habit of mind. And as I said, it's biased. It is going to contain human biases. It's gotten better around certain things, which has led to certain other weird things where all of a sudden, because the humans have said, always make sure that your pictures are diverse when you do a picture of people. And so all of a sudden, you've got people of color in rooms where there were never people of color, right? Historically inaccurate. So the bias, you're not going to necessarily ever be able to take it out. You just have to learn to be sensitive to it. We also remind students, keep your personal information private. There's a lot of intellectual property risk and privacy risk, and those are just good habits. So what kind of things have we seen in courses so far? It's really fun as a debate partner or an opponent to prep for an in-class debate. So the actual thing the students can be judged on is what they do in class, right? So that's oral, it's in class, great. But they can warm up with the debate partner that's an AI debate partner, so they have more to bring to that in-class debate. Our instructor said the debates really improved and were much richer because this Warm Act activity of 15 minutes with AI got them thinking, got them flexibly getting ready to counter things. And it really enriched the in-class debates. We had one instructor who had students use the voice to text to give their elevator pitch. It was a communication class. And they gave the AI different personas to give feedback on that elevator pitch. It allowed them to practice a few more times before they had to go and do it in front of the class. Team evaluation collaboration assistance has been one that's been kind of interesting. That same group of kids I talked about who were playing with Gen Z language and Be Critical, that was actually partly in a team evaluation context. And they made it like rank and score each other. And they talked about whether it was right or whether it wasn't right. But it provided an interesting mediation that helped them actually talk about where, oh, well, when Joe added this piece, that was really helpful, or have some awkward conversations about, dude, you never got your stuff to us in time, right? So that's an interesting area that I want to explore more, but there seems to be some value there. Brainstorming, content area summary for topic exploration, very standard use. Outlining, I mentioned that with digital writing, you can also lose track of what you've written and where it is. AI can very quickly take your paper and outline it for you so that you can then check, or the students can check, whether that flow is right, whether the build is right, whether the storytelling is right, whatever. And that can be very helpful to help students get another look at something and maybe motivate some changes. And feedback and writing, lots of good uses there. Again, students don't revise a lot. So if we can motivate them to look at their paper one more time, to look at it a little differently through a different lens, that's all good to me. I like to pair it with human feedback, not replace, or use it as an additional revision. And sometimes Ethan Mollick talks about this best available human versus best available AI and choose what there is. A lot of our students are doing their work at 2 a.m. and there aren't a lot of good humans available to all of them at that hour. I am certainly not going to be available to them at that hour. So AI feedback might be better than nothing if we've taught them to stay in control of it, right? Not just to make every little thing it says. Interesting student reflection from one of our students here. Using AI didn't just make things easier, it actually made me more careful. I started questioning whether the suggestions made sense, whether they fit what I wanted to say, and whether they were supported by good evidence. Oh my God, the kid's thinking, right? These tools helped a lot, but the biggest learning came from being deeply involved in the topic and thinking hard about how to communicate it well. Okay, this instructor gets an A+, obviously, right? But it's not taking away the learning. It's not offloading the learning if you pair it with these habits. Another student, it made me think about my argument a lot. It was a little bit daunting, a little scary, because it provided really good counter arguments. I had to think a lot in order to provide a good argument. That's what we want. We want them to think. We want them to know how to use a tool to help push their thinking. This is an interesting nuance. So one student said that going to office hours is helpful in determining what the professor wants to see. I think we're writing to our audience, aren't we? And see if I missed anything throughout my research. But AI was also helpful by providing solid suggestions that sometimes matched the professors and peers, but also had some of those minute details. So the student was evaluating the affordances and limitations of both, prioritizing them differently. Another interesting thing, for different students, it may be a better or worse partner for feedback. So this student said, it encouraged me to get feedback because I wasn't afraid of the stigma. The barrier to entry was much lower. It didn't cost me anything to use the AI, if that makes sense. So our students are notoriously bad at coming to office hours. They don't always use the writing center. We want them to. We tell them to, but they don't always do it. And maybe this is a starting point, right? Maybe this is one option that for some of our students will help. So when do you want to infuse AI into your curriculum? Where productive struggle requires some scaffolding, where its use is requiring critical thinking, and it's authentic, right? But not when it's just offloading without higher order effort or human connection or imperfection as a value, or where students are not in a position to corroborate and that matters, right? I don't want my physician's assistant to use it when they're figuring out what to do with me if they're not in a position to double check, if it's important. So we're going to use our learning outcomes and alignment with them to decide that. I'm going to think about where the student is developmentally, right? Are we in secondary? Are we in post-secondary? Or where are we? What kinds of students do I have? And evaluate the risk of over-reliance versus benefits. And honestly, do you have time? Do you have time to do it? What about using it as an instructor? We have resources, but you can use it to help you generate some ideas on how to improve it. We have student support ideas prompts where you tell the AI what you're noticing your students are struggling with. You can have it create some assignments or active learning activities. Again, have it do like 5 or 10 and then figure out what might work for you. Tell it about your students and what your learning objectives are and see if it can help you get some new ideas. Have it help you create a lesson plan around the struggle and maybe generate some new ways to explain content, right? You can tell it a little bit about your students and say what kind of explanation would really make sense to a biology student versus a history student, right? And tell them a little bit about the community. Now, it's going to create these explanations based on biased representation. So be careful about that, right? Like we don't want to assume that every Hispanic student plays soccer, right? So be the human in charge and think about whether the bias is actually going to be problematic. But it may help you flexibly think about your audience. But make sure that when you're using the AI, you're using that same strategy of thinking first, good enough prompting, be the boss, interrogating, right? It's true for us too. I've also got in here some multilingual prompts where the prompts are pretty long when you look at them, but they infuse things we know about multilingual learners, and it will look specifically for things that multilingual learners are likely to have struggles with. So that's one of the ways that you can grab on some knowledge, feed it into the AI, and get better help. Of course, human collaborators are always better and more fun, and we'll share the laughter with you, but sometimes you don't have the time for that or the availability of that. Remember to be transparent, right? That was an early comment. So, did I use AI for this? Let's talk about that for a second. Yes, I did, because I'm practicing. But I spent hours crafting the slide deck first on my own without turning to AI. Took my old slides and thought about this group and my audience and did all those things that it really sucks sometimes to actually have your co-PI be a communication professor, because now I have her in my head saying, okay, make sure your slides aren't too busy, make sure whatever. Anyway, so I did all of those human things, right? Then I prompted the AI. And you can see here, I've given you actually, I thought I had a link to my chat. But you can see here, I'm giving a keynote presentation for a conference event with higher education. The attendees are really wonderful and they're smart, and gave it some of the constraints around how long it was. And then I told it to take a persona, pretend you're a community college instructor in history that uses writing, but doesn't maybe isn't a writing instructor, and you're tired and you're stressed, but you've been in the classroom 10 years. What do you think? What do I need to do? How could this be better? Right? So I drafted it first. I thought first. My prompt included some things about persona, context, and expertise. I then did push back at it. It gave me some ideas, and one of them was good, and I took it. And one of them was like, no, it missed the point. It told me I should separate student-facing versus instructor-facing things. And part of my point is we all have to have these habits, right? So I'm like, nope, sorry, not that one. So I corroborated it, I interrogated it, and I reflected, and then took some and not others of its suggestions, which gave me a fresh eye to look at the slides again, forced me to look at the slides again, even though I was like tired of my own talking, and got me one more revision that was a little bit different and hopefully a little bit better. So be transparent if you're using it. We're seeing some real friction. Well, I don't want to use friction. We're seeing some criticism of instructor use by students who are talking about how instructors shouldn't be using AI. And I think that these positions are calcifying a little bit. And we really do want to take a minute to be clear and transparent about how we can use AI in some places, right? So I've got some prompts for you and your students. Some little videos. But I want to leave you with a couple things, and then we'll hopefully have a few minutes to do some conversations, because I know I've been ignoring the chat. If you only do one thing, I heard Jose Bowen, who's the writer, do I have it? Of a pretty good book, Teaching with AI, talk yesterday, and I loved this thing. If you do only one thing, find something you hate to do, and try to get AI to do it. Great human-centered use. What do you not like doing? For my husband, that's tracking his time. I'm like, dude, you need to figure out how to get AI to track your time for you. What can it do? Because it's going to free you up to do things that you like to do. But whatever you do, don't outsource what you love to do. And this was a point made at the Cal State Chico training too. If you love giving feedback, don't outsource that. If that's how you figure out where your students are and what they're thinking, don't outsource that. Outsource other stuff then, right? Make a good choice about when to turn to AI. Be explicit and transparent with your students so that they can talk about it. Okay, so for your class, besides that whole figure out what you hate to do, which is more for you, 3 possibilities. So it's like, you get to pick agency. I'm giving you agency. Put one of your assignments into AI so you see what it does with it. Push back a couple, like give it a fair shot, right? Like pretend like you're a fairly smart student pushing the AI to give you good advice. And then think about what that tells you about your class and where there might be some places that AI is. And think about whether you need to make some time to look at your SLOs. Maybe this is an opportunity to talk to your class about what AI can do and how it would do it and whether it would do it well. What do you learn from that? Is there some action you take after that? Take one assignment and modify it with AI. We've got some suggested prompts. Maybe modify it to use different modalities. Have AI act as one of your students, give you feedback on it. What's not clear? Some of you all write assignments that are ridiculously complicated. Maybe we can clarify that a little bit. Or maybe maybe not, maybe you're perfect and your AI is going to tell you that because it's a sycophant. So you might want it to be one of your cranky or critical students. Make sure you tell your AI about your students when you give it that persona so that it's more likely to give you relevant feedback. And the heaviest lift, maybe you insert AI into one assignment. I think putting it into a peer feedback cycle is fairly low stakes. Having it summarize a resource and have students corroborate it is another fairly low stakes. Having the topic of the debate be around an AI topic is a way to infuse some AI literacy into the content. So we've got a handout with suggestions for various kinds of activities. You can find those all at our Gen AI ED website, and you can remix them and use them and adapt them for free. We have an introductory AI curriculum if you wanted to just plug and play it or adapt it. You can find our research there. So you've got a lot of resources. An explicit, here's how to do it for peer review. Here's how to do the reverse outline I was talking about. This work is a project of a lot of people besides me. And I'm very grateful to my people and to my funders and to the teachers who let us into their class and talk with us through it. Also, if you want to do this for 10 whole weeks, we are having a AI in higher education course through our continuing education that I'm actually teaching. So you can spend 10 weeks talking about this, and I'm happy to do that. Questions. What can I tell you that I haven't? Because I think I have like 6 minutes. Look at me with my time management. Any questions? I don't know if the moderators maybe want to, who've probably been watching the comments. I haven't had a chance to keep up because I was throwing so much at you.
I don't think we've had a lot of questions. It's more like comments, like people pitching in and actually commenting. But
and
yes,
that's what
please,
I love
if we
about this
do,
group.
right.
Yeah.
So yes, please, if we do have any questions, let us know.
And I am sorry I threw so much at you.
Dr.
But I
Tate,
felt
this
like
is
with you guys I
Susie.
could. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. In the lobby, we have somebody who wants to know a link to your CEAI course, please.
I would like that too. The Digital Learning Lab.org will have it. It's not up yet. I'm sorry. But come play with me. I would love that. We'll have it posted on our site soon.
Can you go back one slide real quick and just show us that your professional development opportunity you mentioned too, please? It was so quick. Thank you.
Yeah.
That will help.
Oh, good. So practical, I'm glad. And the slide deck, which let's see if I can put it in again, has live links in it. So there's more there if you want to dig in a little deeper to any of the sections. You'll be able to do that. But I'm going to definitely read the comments when I get done, the meeting chat when I get done, because I want to see what I missed as I was speeding you through.
There were a lot of really great comments, definitely. Good discussions here on the sidebar.
Well, and that's part of why I started with the chat, because I know you guys are so brilliant and you're really good at the chat. And this looks different in different places, right? And so you guys know lots of things to share with each other. Enrique, what have you got?
Great presentation, Dr. Tate. Some of the comments were meant to, are we losing the human aspect of our voices? You somewhat touched into it somewhat into that. Especially like for like the English faculty, or have students writing papers, all that stuff. How do you address those issues?
I think it takes a multi-pronged approach, right? I can't solve it, but I can try to talk about it, again, that transparency thing, and explicitly, and be more aware of how I need to promote the humanness in things, and talk about where that matters, and where I'm having those struggles, right? So that at least I'm modeling how to think about the problem. Like when I hear that students are dumbing down their writing to not get triggered by AI, that kills a part of my soul, right? This is not okay. And I can't solve it in every classroom, but I can make some efforts in my classroom to say, hey, I'm not going to use AI detection. If you choose to shortchange yourself, that will make me sad, and I will hold you accountable where and if I can. But mostly, you're not going to get a great grade from me if your writing sounds like AI, because it doesn't have you and imperfection in it. But I do worry as a language person that we're already seeing the tone and the nuance and the rhythm of AI generated language seeping into all the rest of our conversations. And I don't know how to fight that except to just keep saying, hey, humanist, 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 right? I don't have a good example. Jarek?
No, go ahead.
Okay, go ahead. You okay, Zola?
Yeah, go ahead.
Right. Dr. Tate, well, thank you very much. I certainly am happy that you mentioned check your SLOs, every other sentence. That's very, thank you very much for making that point. I do have a question about transparency, with AI as something that we just do now every day. What are the limits when we use calculators, and in certain, let's just say, advanced physics classes, that they the scientists have those very advanced calculators. Do they always disclose that, hey, I didn't do it in my head, or and calculator did it for me, this particular calculation, and where does it end? Where is this borderline between what it is that's ethical, as far as I'm concerned, to letting you know as
Yes.
my
Yes.
professor?
Great question. We're a little hypocritical about AI, right? I feel like, yeah. And there's a lot of moral judgment on both sides. And maybe that's just the world or the nation right now. But we got to start getting our kids comfortable with nuance. And I think as instructors, the explicitness is important because it's a modeling thing. But no, how do you decide? And that's part of why an AI policy is rough to write. How do I decide whether using Grammarly, which now is AI enhanced, has to be disclosed versus going to ChatGPT to outline it for me to think about it? Like, these are tools, and I'm in charge, and I'm responsible for what comes out at the end. So I'm, in the end, I think we're going to have to learn, and it's going to depend. Writing is a very sociocultural thing, and I think figuring it out for your class and your community, your department, is something that we have to talk about and decide. But I agree, there's a lot of hypocrisy there, and a sense that we can ever be fully transparent. Like, what, you're going to just watch me write everything? No. So as instructors, I think the modeling is helpful for our students to understand what choices we're making. But I think there's a lot of overreach as far as what, you may not submit to this journal if you used any AI. Well, yeah, I'm in Microsoft Word, there's AI there.
Right.
Right.
And I don't know how many of you have ever written something on your own and then actually submitted it to an AI checker, because I've done it multiple times where it comes out as 99% AI generated. I'm like, no, it is not.
In fact, no. Yeah.
Right. Well, we are at time here. So thank you so much, Dr. Tate, for this wonderful conversation. It was really great to spend some time reflecting on our own and then our students' use of AI. And I hope that our audience today learned as much as I did and got some really great takeaways to bring back into their various roles, whatever those roles are, right? And I, just like Jarek said, we appreciate that you're talking about our SLOs. And I also think that the point that you made about really considering why we are making our students write is one of the first important steps to not only making our writing prompts better for our students, but also aligning them with our actual intended learning outcomes, and maybe also reflecting on whether our writing assignments are even appropriate assessments in some settings. So again, just thank you from all of us here at the SLO Symposium, and we hope that you all have a really lovely rest of the day today in the other breakout sessions.